political sphere. I would like to thank President Trump for our joint work, for the well-wishing and trustworthy tone of our conversation. It's important that both sides are result-oriented, and we see that the President of the U.S. has a very clear idea of what he would like to achieve. He sincerely cares about prosperity of his nation. Still, he understands that Russia has its own national interests. I expect that today's agreements will be the starting point, not only for the solution of the Ukrainian issue, but also will help us bring back business-like and pragmatic relations between Russia and the U.S. And in the end, I would like to add one more thing. I'd like to remind you that in 2022, during the last contact with the previous administration, I tried to convince my previous American colleague that the situation should not be brought to the point of no return when it would come to hostilities. And I said it quite directly back then that it's a big mistake. Today, when President Trump is saying that if he was the president back then, there will be no war. And I'm quite sure that it would indeed be so. I can confirm that. I think that overall, me and President Trump have built a very good business-like and trustworthy contact. And I have every reason to believe that moving down this path, we can come, and the sooner the better, to the end of the conflict in Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. That was very profound. And I will say that I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Radcliffe, thank you very much. But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here, and I think, you know, everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time, and we look forward to that. We look forward to dealing. We're going to try and get this over with. We really made some great progress today. I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir. We had many tough meetings, good meetings. We were interfered with by the Russia hoax. That made it a little bit tougher to deal with, but he understood it. I think he's probably seen things like that during the course of his career. He's seen it all, but we had to put up with the Russia hoax. He knew it was a hoax, and I knew it was a hoax, but what was done was very criminal. But it made it harder for us to deal as a country in terms of the business and all of the things that we'd like to have dealt with. But we'll have a good chance when this is over. So just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin and his entire team, whose faces, who I know in many cases, otherwise, other than that, whose faces I get to see all the time in the newspapers. You're almost as famous as the boss, but especially this one right over here. But we had some good meetings over the years, right? Good, productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed, and President Putin wants to see that as much as I do. So, again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Taking questions.
Well, there we are. Short and sweet. No, well, perhaps not so sweet if you're Ukrainian, because the one word that I certainly didn't hear in that news conference from either president was ceasefire. President Putin kicked things off saying the negotiations were useful, thorough and constructive. It makes sense we met here because our countries are close neighbours. He said to Trump when he arrived, "Good afternoon, we're neighbours." He then talked about history, talked about visiting the memorial he attended involving Russian and US troops. He said it was a long overdue meeting, and he said, "We thank President Trump for trying to help with the resolution of the Ukrainian conflict." And he then started talking ominously once again about what he's always talked about, which are the root causes of the conflict. And he has talked a lot about that. Then he said something which was a surprise. He said Ukraine's security should be ensured. Didn't elaborate on that. Didn't say much more about that, didn't talk specifically about security guarantees. We hope the agreement we have produced paves the way to a resolution without saying what the agreement is. Then talked about broader cooperation was possible. But as I say, no mention of a ceasefire, and he asked European nations not to, quote, torpedo progress. Excuse me. Then Donald Trump said they were productive talks, a couple of points we agreed on, others Donald Trump said not so much. He then said he would call European leaders and also Zelensky after the meeting. "We made some great progress. I have always a great relationship with Vladimir," he said. And then he talked about the Russia hoax, which he said got in the way of their relationship. Extremely productive, said Trump, but no deal until there's a deal. We're going to stop thousands of people being killed. And then he said to President Putin, "We hope to see you again." I think Putin then said, "Yeah, next time in Moscow." And I think Trump said, "Yeah, I might get some heat for that." But as I say, it looks like they've agreed to say the talks have been productive, things have moved on, but no talk of exactly what the agreement is they've made. US correspondent James Matthews was in the room for their statements because it wasn't really a news conference, no opportunity for journalists to ask questions. And James, I didn't hear the word, I don't know whether you did, the word ceasefire.
Yeah, that was the word unspoken. And its absence jumped out, did it not, Mark? That was what Ukraine wanted to hear, European allies wanted to hear. 300 journalists inside this room waiting for the word ceasefire on which this conflict would turn. Had they mentioned a ceasefire today, it would have changed the nature of the discussion. We appear to be well short of that, I think. You've picked out, Mark, Putin's statement about the fundamental causes. To make this settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate the primary cause, to consider all legitimate concerns of Russia. That's been Russia's starting point, and it's been the sticking point throughout this whole process. For Vladimir Putin to stand on that stage alongside Trump and have the confidence to articulate that tells me that that resonates with Donald Trump, and Vladimir Putin is welded to that as an ongoing position, a position which is unacceptable to Ukraine. That's what Ukraine has made clear so far. In terms of Donald Trump, he did say he was talking up the meeting, called it very productive. We haven't quite got there, he said. There's no deal until there's a deal. Spoke about how he was going to call NATO Zelensky, an extremely productive meeting, he said, accentuating the positive, but in there was the negative. He said there are many points that we agreed to, but many points yet to be agreed, some not significant, one most significant. We have a very good chance of getting there, he said. Of course, the first question would have been, had they taken questions, well, what's the most significant stumbling block? Is it as articulated as Vladimir Putin? And what are you going to do about it? Are you with him on that? And if you're not, what are the consequences of Putin? So frankly, if both those men, both big beasts in this conflict, the two individuals most influential, if they are both welded to Russia's headline ask, what Russia has wanted all along throughout this, then I have to say there will be pessimism around the prospect of taking this any further. I'm not quite sure what the reaction is that Donald Trump expects in Ukraine and in European capitals, but it might be a very difficult phone call. Elsewhere in that discussion, Mark, or these two separate statements, we got a sense, I thought, of Putin the player, how he has succeeded in reeling in Donald Trump and engaging with him as an old friend. That's how it very much appeared, the old friend that he's invited back to Moscow. He said, look, I tried to engage on Ukraine with your predecessor, parroting Donald Trump. We hear that all the time from Donald Trump, how this is Joe Biden's war. Well, that was reinforced, cemented by Vladimir Putin. He knows the buttons to press. And he said, I tried to tell the previous occupant of the White House how this Ukrainian situation shouldn't be brought to the point of no return. Trump, he said, well, his line is that if he was president, there wouldn't have been a war. And Vladimir Putin endorsed that, said that was the case. We've built a very good, trustworthy, business-like contact, he said. So this might very much of Vladimir Putin cementing his relationship with Donald Trump. There was a tricky spot for him not so long ago when Trump was disappointed with Vladimir. He was putting that on social media. He was leaning towards the Ukrainian cause. I thought we saw two old friends getting back together with a mutual understanding.